welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. I am your host, MongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about NXT Battleground from the UFC Apex from June the 9th, 2024. Very solid show from top to bottom. Nothing sucked. Main event was just okay, mostly due to Trick Williams' inexperience. No real surprises for the show. I'm guessing they're going to leave some stuff to be built upon later, because they wanted to deliver some of the things that they had been building on over the past couple of weeks. So usually I would say, they need to have something extra, but I wouldn't say that this time. Now, the UFC Apex, it looks like the Performance Center was just a little bit more steps. So it looked familiar, you know. The UFC fans, the MMA fans who have been looking at it for a little while, as UFC have done shows there, were astounded at how well it looked. Meanwhile, a lot of the wrestling fans were laughing because it was such a small crowd. And they were like, oh, this was like a shindy, or a shit indie, as they say. But it's like, no, I've been to some crappy indies, and the buildings are never that nice. The people are there's never that many people in the building. But I think it ended up being about 700 people there. So it was I think that's about the normal amount of tickets and things for that venue. So I'm not sure how many people the venue can hold, but it was about 700 people there. So it was not terrible. Dave Meltzer, the only note that we should be discussing, finally put over NXT after their recent ratings increase and the interest that has been generated by the TNA crossovers and stuff like this, has dubbed that NXT is the strongest or hottest it's been in years. So Meltzer is behind the curve. I've been talking about NXT being great since they blew up Black and Gold and brought in all of these talent, and things have been interesting because characters are what people are tuning in to see. But here's what Meltzer has to say. The brand is strong. It's picking up, not the wrestling. They're very good with the stories and everything like that. One of the keys to this thing is that they've got a lot of young characters, which is the thing that nobody else has. This is a very young show, and there is something to be said for having a lot of young people on television, and it's made a difference. NXT, really the hottest it's been in years. Let's be honest about this. It has nothing to do with them being young. All right? The youth is, well, I shouldn't say nothing. Let's say of all of the things that you could say, them being young will probably be in the top 4, maybe. And it'd probably be number 3. Number 1 is, without a doubt, people being invested in the characters. I mean, Meltzer even said it himself that they have a lot of quote-unquote young characters, but it's not about the characters being young. It's about the characters being different, being fresh. The guys at the top when this thing started was Ilya Dragunov, Trick Williams, Carmelo Hayes. Guys with personality. They invested a full year, even more, into that Carmelo Hayes, Ilya Dragunov, Trick Williams thing before Trick Williams even won the belt. So they invested a lot of time in Trick Williams, his character arc, and his story, and let people get behind him before they gave him the title and left him on the brand pretty much by himself to cover it. And then they allowed his charisma to take over. Trick Williams is incredibly charismatic and is carrying the brand pretty much by himself outside of the surprise pop-ups that they've been doing. I mean, you got to give this guy credit. He's been doing a lot. Now, you could talk trash about his in-ring stuff, but people are tuning in to see him do fun stuff. That segment with him and Lash Legend and Noam Dar was incredibly fun. He's been doing fun stuff, and he's been the guy that's been left to carry the brand by himself. They took everybody. They took Ilya, they took Braun Breaker, they took Carmelo. You know, if it wasn't for Ethan Page magically showing up 2 weeks before the pay-per-view, we wouldn't even had him on this show. So Trick Williams should get a lot of credit for this. Second is the women. Jada Parker breaking the internet every time she shows up. Sol Ruka, breaking the internet with her great finisher. The women's division having so many dime pieces and thick young ladies on it. People are interested in seeing them. People want to see those women. And they're interesting. They're doing interesting stuff to a degree, Lola Vice is doing interesting stuff. Roxanne Perez is doing interesting stuff. They were telling interesting stories with both the men and the women. This left the tag team division a little weak, but the men and the women were at least carrying the brand in terms of exposure and people being charismatic in those divisions, and people wanted to see that. And there is no problem just saying that. You could, again, trash talk, the inexperience of the talent all you want, but they're there to generate eyeballs, and that's what's happening. The in-ring part will catch up. Most of these people have not been wrestling 5 or 6 years. They've been wrestling 18 months, 24 months, whatever. That part will catch up. Once you get the characters rolling and you get the charisma to show, the rest will catch up. So, Meltzer finally catches up to the rest of us, those of us who have been listening to me for a while, talk about NXT is the best show on television. They thought I was crazy. Turns out I'm right, because I know what I'm talking about. When Dominic Mysterio was on NXT, he was popping a number because Dominic Mysterio was interesting and people wanted to see him do something on that show. Yeah, they brought Becky Lynch down too, and she popped a number because she's Becky Lynch. And what the hell is she doing in NXT? But for the most part, people was there to see the young talent do interesting things and be engaging. And so that's something you can't see on Raw or SmackDown or AEW currently. Now let's get into this show. Main event, Trick Williams defeats Ethan Page. I don't know how many of you pay attention to the way Shawn Michaels books, but Ethan Page will more than likely be the guy who beats Trick Williams for this title. Now, you may say, well, he just beat him. Well, that's kind of how Shawn Michaels booked in NXT UK, and it's kind of how he books a little bit in NXT, is that he'll have the contender challenge the champion pretty early, and then they lose, and then you build them back up, and then they win. So I can see Ethan Page being forced to start from the bottom, building themselves back up, and then maybe even at the next pay-per-view event, or maybe the event afterwards, he's going to beat Trick Williams for the title. Trick Williams needed to win this match because he had to be established as the top guy on the brand. He can't have a guy come out of nowhere and beat him, and then all of a sudden we got to start all over with who's the top guy on NXT. Well, it's Ethan Page, who, just showed up yesterday. The match itself was okay. Trick Williams, again, very inexperienced in the ring, a little clunky. He's starting to do Booker T spots, so he's starting to do like the side kicks, and he did the Uranagi. He's one step away from doing a Spinneroonie. One step. Ethan Page ended up power slamming him through a table, which was kind of dope actually. But it didn't lead to the finish. The finish itself was very weird. Ethan Page was attacking Trick Williams in the corner. He was a little too aggressive, punching Trick Williams in the head. The referee pulled him off. Ethan Page turned his attention to the ref. When he turned back around, Trick hit the trick shot, which is a pump knee, knocked him down and pinned him. And, very interesting. And I was okay with it because it was like Ethan Page beat himself. And you also could have the little complaint of blaming the referee. So, solid enough match. Wasn't the best match on the show, clearly, but it wasn't the worst either. So, I know Trick Williams is going to get torn apart for not being the most perfectly choreographed pro wrestler of all time, but he doesn't need to be. He's got it. The rest of it has to catch up. All right. So, Jordynne Grace defeated by Roxanne Perez. Great match between these two. Just really good stuff. TNA executives were at ringside. Jonathan Gresham, who was Jordynne Grace's husband, was at ringside. And Gail Kim was there. Gail Kim actually was photographed there early. It's saying that the TNA executive wants to further the relationship with WWE. That's why they were present, likely talking to the executives in NXT. People was expecting a lot of run-ins or other things that involved TNA and NXT. And you got, some seeds planted for some future things. But let's focus on this match first. I really thought this match was great. In terms of taking Roxanne Perez, who was lacking in something and really pulling that out of her. She really stepped up in this match. And what her attack on Jordynne Grace, taking the strength out, trying to attack the arm, the blatant cheating, using her speed and her technique to counter the experience and the strength of Jordynne Grace was really good. And I thought, more importantly, she was aggressive. And she was legitimately aggressive. And the match was physical. And I thought that is what Roxanne Perez needed. For a long time, she felt like she was going through the motions, saying things that she didn't believe, and trying to be a heel, and it wasn't really clicking. But here, it felt like, okay, she's finally starting to bloom into being a heel. So she was really good here. Jordynne Grace clearly was very good. I thought the match was better than I expected it to be. The shenanigans, though, which a lot of people was like, ugh, they did the shenanigans. Look, Jordynne Grace is a world champion for another company. She was going to lose. They were going to do something to give her a complaint. You should not be surprised at all that they did what they did. So what did they do? They had Tatum Paxley jump the barricade. She teased being obsessed with the NXT Women's title, but instead she snatched Jordynne Grace's Knockouts Championship and tried to run off with it. Then Dana Ash by Elegance, that's her name. She came out, she did a tug of war with Tatum Paxley. Jordynne Grace left the ring, hit both of them with her belt, then got back into the ring, tried to use a Juggernaut driver. Roxanne Perez countered it, hit Pop Rocks, and then pinned her. You had to give Jordynne Grace some kind of complaint. You were not going to have Jordynne Grace beat Roxanne Perez because that would make NXT look bad. And you couldn't have her lose clean because that would make TNA look bad. So you gave Roxanne Perez a somewhat legitimate finish because she countered Jordynne Grace's finishing move. And then she won the match. Now, in the future, when Jordynne Grace is under contract, no doubt this match would have went the other way. But for now, Roxanne Perez was the right opponent and was the right person to win. Now, more than likely, next week, they will be doing an open challenge for the Knockouts Championship at TNA's pay-per-view. It will more than likely be Tatum Paxley, who is going to be the person that's going to challenge Jordynne Grace. Tatum Paxley is not a big name in NXT. I would have expected somebody of a higher caliber, but considering it's an NXT talent popping up on TNA, it could just be fun to do, But it's seeming like, NXT isn't playing fair. They're not going to give somebody of equal caliber to TNA, which, you would ask the question, who would that be if you were going to give somebody to TNA to do a job for Jordynne Grace? Who would it be? And I couldn't give you an answer because I have no earthly idea who would be of a substantial caliber for Jordynne Grace to beat that is, really pushed in TNA, unless it would have to be somebody from the main roster of WWE, like a Natalya or somebody of that ilk. But it seems like they're really teasing Tatum Paxley right now. So, okay, whatever. But this is to be the future of the NXT TNA thing. It no longer involves the NXT Championship because it clearly wasn't going to. Because for weeks now, they've been talking about the Japanese female pro wrestler Julia coming to NXT to wrestle Roxanne Perez. And it seems like that's going to be the goal, and that's the plan. They're sticking with it. And the Jordynne Grace thing got hot out of nowhere, and they're kind of trying to figure out how to get this to work while not messing with the plan that they had with Julia and Roxanne Perez. So you couldn't have Roxanne lose the belt, because then you're going to have Julia versus Jordynne Grace. Why? So have her wrestle Roxanne Perez. So they're going to try to do something with this Tatum Paxley thing to keep this thing running. I'm not sure if it's going to still have the juice. But some people expected Jordynne Grace to win kind of as a surprise. And I think it would have been a nice surprise if they didn't have any other plans. Because they had the Julia thing in their back pocket, and that's something they've been talking about for several weeks. I think if that wasn't there, like her coming to NXT and she's going to be there on a semi-permanent basis, if it wasn't for her coming in, they probably would have given the belt to Jordynne Grace. But they couldn't in good conscience give her the belt when you have this whole thing with Julia set up, because, you've already promised the Japanese guys pretty much this spot. And apparently the Rosie Ogawa and Triple H are in regular conversation, and he's been trying to help Rosie Ogawa build Marigold. So he's not going to pull the rug from underneath them by switching the title and saying, oh, well, basically now TNA's got the belt, so we got to go through them to get, Julia that title match. That really is kind of silly. So my guess, if I had to make a really big guess, is that Julia's wrist injury pushed Jordynne Grace into this match. That would be my guess, because Julia injured her wrist. I think she had to have surgery or something like that. So they're likely going to push back her match. So it'll probably be in July. And at the Heatwave show will probably be when Julia comes in to wrestle Roxanne Perez. And they had to have somebody here because this was likely where she was supposed to be. But because she got injured, they had to push it back. And so they just used Jordynne Grace as filler in order to get us to the next part. At least that's the way it seems. Otherwise, why would you bring in Jordynne Grace at this particular point in time just to have her lose and then have her wrestle Tatum Paxley? That's odd. But I don't think Jordynne Grace is done either. It's looking like this is not a one-off, that they're going to keep doing stuff. And from some other things that I saw on tonight too, it looks like the TNA stuff is not over and likely will continue. Match 4 on the show, Obafemi defeated Wesley and Joe Coffey to maintain being a North American champion. Obafemi is probably my favorite wrestler today. He's huge. He's jacked. He cuts crazy promos in good diction. And he just looks like a classic pro wrestler from like 1989 or 1992. He's like somebody that if I was a kid, I would be like, that guy's fucking cool. He's cool. I wish he was like Ahmed Johnson I wish they had an Obafemi when I was a kid. We got Ahmed Johnson. It was all right. Farouk, not so much. But Ahmed Johnson was all right. Obafemi is going to be a monster. He's going to be great on this roster. Joe Coffey, I don't know, man. He just seems to be a guy in the match. A lot of the Gallus stuff in here was about trying to help Joe Coffey win. There's some really great spots in this piece. The bench press off the top rope where he basically just launched Wesley, he being Obafemi, launched Wesley into Joe Coffey was pretty cool. The Meteora countered into a powerbomb was nasty, just absolutely nasty. Obafemi just killed these guys. It was great. Gallus jumped him. He then stood up like a beast and slammed their heads into the ring apron and beat them both up. Then went in there and won the match. Obafemi pinned Joe Coffey. Good. So Obafemi, thumbs up. Again, probably my favorite wrestler today. Afterwards, the Gallus jumped Wesley in the backstage area. Even though Joe Coffey was the one who got pinned, Gallus beat the shit out of Wesley. And now here is where I think the TNA crossover is going to continue, because Trey Miguel has been begging for the Rascals to reunite. And there needs to be at least 3 of them. And Zachary Wentz used to work in NXT. Now, I don't know why you couldn't use Myron Reed. Hopefully Myron Reed gets a look. He gets to come in too. Stop forgetting Myron Reed. But at least right now, it seems like Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz are going to come in to fight Gallus with Wesley. I like that. That seems fine to me. I don't understand why it has to be Gallus and not 3 other guys, but okay, fine. If it get us what we want, which is the Rascals to be reunited, and at least get that moment where you get MSK with the tag team to be reunited for one night only, that could be fun. And plus I like Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz and TNA. They're very underappreciated there. Wesley is absolutely positively got to be licking his chops when he heard that Ricochet was leaving, because I'm telling you, nobody feels that spot better than Wesley. And despite the fact that I don't really like him, he's a better promo than Ricochet. He's more believable than Ricochet. So I think that if Ricochet wants to vacate that spot and leave that cubicle, Wesley will slide right into it and probably end up being better in that role because he's more believable. He's a better promo, and he actually emotes better. And I think he actually has a connection with the audience that's somewhat stronger than what Ricochet could generate, despite the fact that Ricochet is probably, I think he's probably about 10 years older and a lot more athletic. So Wesley is going to get a lot out of this thing. It's not over for him. I wish it was over for Joe Coffey, though. I don't see the benefit of that guy. Match 3, the NXT Underground. Lola Vice defeats Shayna Baszler. This match was great. This was good. They did a really good job of selling worked MMA. Some of this stuff was clearly, the pro wrestling version of MMA, like the hammer fists and, how you hammer fist somebody so many times in the head and the referee don't stop it. That's kind of like the pro wrestling element of it. Shayna Baszler jumping out of the ring on a rear naked choke was crazy, just like a crazy spot. And it was really the only way for them to get out of it. Like in my head, like what happens if you do get into a rear naked choke? You could like jump out the ring, which is exactly what she did. Shayna Baszler ended up injuring her knee when she tried to jam it into Lola Vice's head. Instead, she missed it and hit the announce desk. And then Lola Vice started to work the knee, which is, of course, sensible psychology. And it actually worked quite a bit into the finish and into later spots. For instance, when Shayna Baszler gets her into the rear naked choke, she tries to separate, the forearm and the bicep from her chin, to try to prevent from getting choked out. And then from there, she went to the knee and she started pulling by the ankle, started pulling the leg up, to agitate the knee. And then Shayna Baszler released the hold. So that was, again, good psychology. They did some good punches on the top of the announce desk, even though it was kind of slow, but it was okay. The finish left some people kind of weird because they didn't understand it. But Shayna Baszler tumbles into the ring. She turns around, gets hit with the spinning back fist, which the second time she got hit with this thing. She stumbles. Lola Vice jumps on top of her with the hammer fist. The referee jumps in, calls the match off. Lola Vice is emoting and she starts twerking and, doing everything right there while Shayna Baszler complains to the ref that she was defending herself and that she was fine, which is typical MMA. I think it was really fun. And Booker T got his twerk off when he got Sexy Red and Lola Vice as they celebrated. They were twerking backstage and even forced the interviewer to twerk, which is NXT is a wild show, bro. It's wild. I know Zoe Stark is somewhere, man. She's like that guy who was watching the Temptations on TV after he quit. That's Zoe Stark. She's sitting in a bar somewhere looking at it like, I can't believe this. We don't do this in pro wrestling. She's got to be miserable. Miserable broad. But Lola Vice, Shayna Baszler, extremely fun match. Match 2 was probably the weakest match on the show. Axiom and Nathan Frazer defeat the Good Brothers. It was okay. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was that great either. I'm not a big fan of the Good Brothers. It's very hard for me to get into their matches. It seems like they might do something more with Axiom and Nathan Frazer as well, because their storyline is about guys from the outside coming in. That's what this whole thing with the Good Brothers is. So it seems like there might be a tag team from outside NXT, hint, hint, that might come in to challenge Nathan Frazer and Axiom. And I would really love it if it was Ace Austin and Chris Bay from TNA. I don't want to get too excited and start, fantasy booking all the TNA NXT stuff. But if you can get two things done, I think the Rascals reunion on NXT will be great. And I think Austin and Chris Bay versus Axiom and Nathan Fraser would be great. That's really all I ask for. I don't need to see Moose. Keep Moose where he is. All right. Keep him away from NXT. Moose is garbage. All right. I know a lot of people like him, but he was maybe good 4 or 5 years ago. He's not so good today. And that stable he's a part of is absolute trash. It's trash, bro. You got sack of potatoes, Eddie Edwards, the extremely terrible Brian Myers, the extra annoying Alicia Edwards. I cannot stand that stable. It sucks. But the Good Brothers, I guess some people have said this is the best match they've had in a while. I wouldn't know. I don't pay attention to the Good Brothers matches. They just don't entertain me at all. Match 1, the historic first ever Women's North American Championship match. Jada Parker, Sol Ruka, Lash Legend, Mia Yim, Fallon Henley, and the winner, Kalani Jordan. The match was much, much better than I expected. Like I said on the preview show, this had the potential to either be a terrible match that everybody dies in, or they tear up their knees, or it was going to be really good. And it turned out to be mostly good. You know, the girls worked very hard, and they really did some really cool spots too. For instance, it took the 5 other girls to bench press Lash Legend and throw her out of the ring. She landed on a ladder that was bridged upon the ring apron and the desk. And I do not believe she came back from this. I think after she took this spot, she was down for the rest of the match. So they really sold it. I was a big fan of the Soul Snatcher spots. So much like Randy Orton would hit multiple RKOs, they had Sol Ruka do the Snow Snatcher twice in a row. First, she did it off the turnbuckle to one of her opponents. Then she did it off the ladder to the other one. It was great. And then Kalani Jordan, she hit her springboard split leg moonsault and then climbed the ladder and won. So Kalani Jordan won the title. She was the least likeliest person to win it, as far as I'm concerned. I would have thought Sol Ruka would have been the best option, or Jada Parker being the second best option. But Kalani Jordan, it's a very interesting choice, a provocative choice. Not one I would have made, because she's probably the least experienced person in the match. She's certainly the youngest. But it seems that they might have a plan. And I think the plan is going to end up being Fallon Henley being the champion for real, for real. Like when it comes to establishing the title, it'll probably be Fallon Henley. And I say that because she's been in a feud with Kalani Jordan. So Kalani Jordan winning a ladder match and then maybe having Fallon Henley challenge her later on, take the title and run with it for a little while. You still get the prestige of Kalani Jordan was the first. And, you know, you got the feel-good moment that went with that. The surprise factor, because a lot of people didn't expect that she would win. You know, the agenda, because, you know, Negroes in the North American title. Speaking of Negroes, there's only one white woman in this entire match, and that's Fallon Henley. All the other women were at least half black. So, you had a 5-1 shot of coming out with a negress, and he did a good job. But so Kalani Jordan was an interesting choice. I know she wasn't everybody's favorite choice because she's not that interesting. She's just kind of generic. And that's why I think that her losing the title to Fallon Henley, this is the big setup. This is like when Leon Ruff won the North American title. It was like it came out of nowhere. Everybody was looking around like, did they really do that? And it was really just a setup for somebody else to win it from him. And that's really what all title wins are. But this is mostly a Kalani Jordan won it. The crowd is chanting, "You deserve it," which almost ruined it for me because I hate when they chant stuff like that. And then, she's going to lose it to Fallon Henley, who's probably going to cheat, screw her out of her dream. And we're probably just going to have her be the first ever North American champion, but she's going to be in pursuit from that point forward and probably not win it back unless, the feud goes long enough that she has to win it back. So I would imagine that you put the belt on a generic babyface like Kalani Jordan to set her up to lose it to somebody more established like a Fallon Henley. So I would imagine Fallon Henley is going to end up winning that belt pretty quickly, probably at the next pay-per-view. I don't expect Kalani Jordan to be champion very long. That's the show. Sexy Red only did spots where she celebrated with the winners. She invited Kalani Jordan to the after party, which gave me an incredible Booker T, Vic Joseph segment where, Vic Joseph didn't know about the after party, but of course Booker T did. He said, "Why do you think I'm dressed like this?" Oh man, Booker T is so much fun. He's incredible. He's incredible for real. So the show was really good. You got Booker T. He got his wish with the twerk. Shawn Michaels said in an interview that him and Sexy Red would have had more fun 30 years ago. She's only 26, but I guess he was talking about himself, that he would have had more fun with Sexy Red 30 years ago. And, good old HBK bombed off somas and coke would have had way too much fun with Sexy Red, and probably wouldn't even remember what she looked like afterwards. He probably wouldn't even remember what he looked like afterwards. But so they had a fun show. No surprises. Again, that was kind of a downer. Some of the finishes were weird, but they were trying to go with safety, just deliver a solid show. But I expect them to do some stuff on Tuesday because they're going to have Wendy Chu back. So they're going to figure out what they're doing with her. The LGBT Tatanka will be coming back. Some people freaked out because Chief J Strongbow was in his vignette, which I didn't even notice the first time I saw it. Chief J Strongbow is not a real Indian, by the way. So that's why, you probably see a lot of the people who know wrestling history and it's like, what is Chief J Strongbow doing in that? It's because he's not a real one. He's an Italian, I think. Always weirded me out that Chief J Strongbow was outed as an Italian, but ended up being really funny because the guy in those pollution commercials, the Indian that cries the one tear, he's Italian too. And Muhammad Hassan, he was Italian too. And all these Italians, they managed to be able to get people to believe that there's something other than Italian. I thought Mark Merrill was black. I thought Randy Savage was black. They're both Italians. So, you're like, oh, Jesus. These guys are like, they got camouflage or something like that. It's that Mediterranean stuff, with the Moors and everything. I don't want to give you guys no history lesson. And anyway, NXT was a fun show. It wasn't nothing to write home about. So if you absolutely are not a fan of NXT, you probably didn't care for this show. But as a fan of NXT, I really liked it. But let me know what you guys think. And I'll talk to you guys later. Like, share, subscribe, and I appreciate you guys' patronage.